There are a few rules in life. And one of them is to be a dugma chaya. In other words, your children are not what you say, your children are what you do.
But they say they see you're too nervous, and they say you're too nervous.
That's true, yeah, you are too nervous.
And they want to be more chill.
Okay.
So what do?
You do your best. So the other side of that coin is it has to be shalom, it has to be peace, taka. It's tricky. See, I'm going to tell you something. You get one chance to raise your kids. There's no dress rehearsal. You do your best, and the Eibishter helps. Now the Eibishter is funny. The Eibishter's way of helping sometimes has, what looks like temporary failures, and then you look back 5 years later, 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, you see that it works out. You're not allowed to doubt yourself. You have to work on not being nervous. I have to work on not being nervous. You got to work on not being nervous. But we have to teach our children that Yiddishkeit is important. Period. It's the dilemma when people talk about OTD, and of course everybody says you're not allowed to say it, not allowed to say this, not allowed to say this. Yeah, the difference between our generation and your parents' generation was in your parents' generation every frum yid was a Bama Sidus Nefesh. It was that simple. If you didn't want to be frum, you weren't frum. In the 1960s, frum boys and girls from relatively frum homes went off to college and became fry on a regular basis. Midei shana b'shana. It was a nest of a few of them stayed frum. And that was life. They went 12 years of day school, 12 years of Teda. Garnished, who stayed frum. Then we all became very fafrumt, very radical. And we have lots and lots of children, Baruch Hashem, and not all of them are so fafrumt like us. And we deal with the fact that some of the kids are rebelling, yeah. And on some level, we can't understand why they rebel, why they don't rebel. But you got to fight the good fight. You have to. Sometimes you have a special case. Special case requires special treatment. But normal conditions, the children have to know that this is really important to us. Because if it's really important to us, it's going to be really important to them. In other words, do you make mistakes? Of course you make mistakes. But it's life. Not to raise your kids. The worst crime, one of my own children and I have an argument for years already. You raise your kids, your brain. There's a culture in America. There's a culture in America among smart people. I had a daughter who went to Simi Valley, where they make the computers. The smartest people in America. The smartest people in America live there. And these people are raising their children, and you're not allowed to use pronouns. It's not he or she, it's they. And the kids come to Gan Yisrael. The menalim of the camp are saying you have to be very careful. You're not allowed to say he or she because you're going to be merachak the kids. My daughter came home disgusted. And these are the smartest people in the world. And the shita is, do not give your children any values. Why? Because it's brainwashing. You raise them, and you don't give them hashkafa selim, and they'll fight for themselves. So I have a standing argument with one of my own children, where the issue is, why did you brainwash us? I mean, whatever. It's not so gross, it's not so strong, but that's the nekudas vikuach. And what I say to my kids is, the worst thing you can do is raise a child without a value system. Because then the child grows up thinking that there is no values. The kid wants to rebel, it's his business. You have to teach him what you believe. Every parent has to teach his child what they believe. Now the kid goes, why did you brainwash me? Why did I brainwash you? Because that's my job. I'm supposed to raise you. And now, if the kid says, I want to choose a different way of life, but what you gave them by raising them is the hashkafa that there is a way of life. Because if you raise a kid and you don't give him any values, the kid grows up thinking that there's nothing that's real. You gave them one hashkafa, he wants it, but at least he was taught by his parents that there's a right and a wrong.
So there's Zaidi, so
no.
Zaidi didn't give the kid
the Zaidi was a Zaidi.
They didn't give their kids that.
And the Zaidi had to contend with the fact that his children the father and the mother of Moshe, yes, looked at him as a alta kaket, as a failure, as the old generation. They suffered him because he was mishpacha, but them gelitten. So the father and the mother, Bechlau, were not respecting the Zaydi. The grandchildren, because they looked at him as he's old for the old country.
Didn't help.
Of course not. But the grandchildren were more influenced from the Zaydi than the parents were. But when the parents said Zaydi's gone, Zaydi's gone. Zaydi's gone. You can't. A person is not allowed to spend his whole life questioning himself. A person has to be able to be critical of himself. A person has to think about what they could do better, what they could do finer, what they could do nicer. But the hadav in the kinder. You have to raise your kids. You have to raise them. You make a mistake, but you have to teach them your values. Then they'll decide they want different ones. But you have to teach them your values, because at least you're giving them the idea that there are values. If you don't raise them with values, they're going to raise equivocal children without any core, which is a deep, 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 deep sickness. It's very difficult to heal from. You change seats.